Hi, welcome to Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Robert Green, and joining me today is Alvin Ashcraft. Hey, Alvin, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing today, Robert?
Great, thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about Windows UI frameworks, which is a subject we could, of course, spend all day talking about, but we're not going to. We'll limit the conversation to something much more manageable. Before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself to anyone that's not that familiar with you?
Sure. Been around the industry for quite a while now. I started developing with Visual Basic back in the mid 90s and moved into .NET when that came out. And when WPF came out in the mid 2000s, I jumped in that and have been doing XAML development of one form or another ever since. And a couple of years ago, I made the transition from developer to writer. So I'm working on the Microsoft Learn team now, doing the Windows developer docs.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you're also, we should mention, the author of a book on
Yes.
WinUI.
Yep, there's 2 editions of that, and I also have a book on parallel programming with .NET and C#.
Excellent. Okay, so you and I have similar stories, sounds like it. So for those of us who have been in the industry for more than a minute, we've obviously done a lot of Windows UI, whether it's starting in WinForms and onto WPF, as you mentioned, etc. So a lot of people have also done that and then moved over to the web. A lot of people started just doing web and have never done Windows UI. There's also mobile apps involved. So I guess, how do you make sense of all of that? What's your view of the state of the industry and particularly the relevance and importance still of Windows UI? Or is it just something that your granddad used to do and who would do that anymore?
I think to an extent there's a lot of kind of legacy feel to Windows apps, but with WinUI, there's a lot of newer stuff out there too. Like just Apple and Adobe have started releasing some new apps for Windows using WinUI. Apple Music and Apple TV, those are WinUI apps, and Adobe has a Fresco app. So I think they're trying to revive it and make it cool again.
So there's an Apple TV Windows app?
Yep, that just came out
within the past year. I need to know that.
Yeah, cool. And Apple devices too, so you can like sync your iPhone and stuff through a WinUI app.
Wow, that's really cool. Okay. Yeah. And that's using WinUI. So give us the very quick rundown of the Windows UI frameworks, the historical overview, and are they all still in use? Are they all still being maintained?
So they're all still being maintained. There's different levels of support and new features that each of them is getting. So back with .NET, we started out with Windows Forms that evolved from the Visual Basic Forms. And then we got WPF in the mid-2000s, around 2006, and that introduced us all to XAML for UI development. And next up, well, we had Silverlight for a short time. We won't talk about that. Then we got the Windows 8 XAML apps, which evolved into UWP with Windows 10. That was around for a few years, and it's still supported today, although it's not getting any new features. That's in the kind of maintenance, bug fix only development now. And then we get WinUI, which evolved from UWP. And the idea there was to take all the features of UWP, the look and feel, and take those controls out of the Windows SDK so that you could evolve the UI framework without being tied to Windows releases. So now we get several new releases of WinUI every year that are outside the Windows releases and SDKs.
So WPF, the apps formerly known as Metro, which was Windows 8, and UWP and WinUI are all based on XAML.
Yes.
Xamarin was based on XAML. .NET MAUI supports XAML. So there's a lot of XAML flavors and variants. And on the one hand, once you've learned one, you can learn the others because they're way more alike than different. On the other hand, it almost seems like every time someone comes up with something new, I got to learn more XAML. And I don't believe that HTML has the same thing. I don't think that there's new variants of HTML coming out all the time. There's new features, obviously. So let's talk about that for a second. Should that scare me off or away, or is that just life?
I think it's just life, and to me, it's not really different than, say, the JavaScript frameworks out there. You've got Angular, you've
True.
got React, you've got all the different things out there for that you'd have to learn when you jump from company to company.
There's also sometimes seem to be a little more transient. These XAML flavors never go away, right?
Right. It seems like everything sticks around forever. Oh, except Silverlight.
Code never dies.
And even Silverlight's still out there with Open Silver. Somebody took that and revived it, and they're trying to put it in WebAssembly.
Okay. Okay, so let's say our people, so our people are still building Windows apps, and we just learned that Apple's built one for Windows. That's exciting. So there's obviously people doing it. What about things like WinForms and WPF? Are people building new apps in that, or is that just legacy? Um, and how should we think about if we're currently using something, one of these frameworks? Should we keep doing it? Should we move over? Or if we were going to start, where would we start?
So with WinForms and WPF, there is a lot of legacy out there. And if you have a legacy app and you want to continue supporting it, you can look at migrating it from .NET Framework WPF over to the modern .NET WPF. And there are upgrade tools built into .NET to help you do that. The same thing with WinForms. You can go from Framework to modern .NET with those as well. And you get all the benefits of the performance of today's .NET. So you can see a huge performance boost by doing that kind of migration. And you can also look at the upgrade tool for going from UWP to WinUI. They have a tool for doing that as well.
Okay.
So a lot of those apps, the XAML is pretty much all the same, except the namespaces have changed.
Okay. So if you were going to start building a Windows app today, you would start with WinUI, right? Because that's the latest, greatest version. You wouldn't start with WPF. You might start with WinForms if you didn't feel like learning XAML at all, right?
Right. If you're a .NET shop and your developers don't know XAML at all and they don't want to take the time to ramp up on it, they could just go with WinForms today.
Okay, and you'd get a reasonably performant app.
Yep. If you're using modern.NET WinForms, you should get a decent performing app.
Okay. And then for WinUI, so I guess what I used to do when something new came out, I'd look for, who's talking about it, what do the docs look like? The docs these days are dramatically better than they were back in the day. But I would also look for books. Who's got a book on that? Because I like learning. I like learning from books personally. I know you've done a WinUI book. Are there other books out there? What's the kind of support if I wanted to dive in and start learning WinUI today?
Yeah, there are a handful of other books out there. There's also some training out there on Microsoft Learn. We've got a couple of training modules on that. And there's for WPF, not so much for new books that I've seen lately, but a lot of the books from the last 5 years would still get you started today.
Okay, and are the courseware developers doing WinUI courses? I mean, what's the ecosystem look like for this stuff?
So as far as other third-party training and things, I'm not too familiar with what other folks are doing with training, but I imagine the big players out there all have courses for WinUI and probably WPF as well.
Okay. So I can also build a Windows app using MAUI. So I could use the MAUI, which came from Xamarin variant of XAML. And obviously, if you know one, you can stick with it. So I learned Xamarin. And so when it came time to move forward, I I've built some MAUI apps, so I'm very familiar with that. I look at WinUI and it obviously looks familiar, but I already know the MAUI variant, so I can stick with that. Let's say I was brand new to this. I wanted to write a Windows app that I also wanted to be able to make cross-platform and a mobile app.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to dive into XAML. I'm happy to do that. And now the question is, do I go MAUI? Do I do WinUI? Because then I could also use the Uno platform from our good friends at Uno, and I could build mobile apps. So I know you probably have your personal preference, but that aside, what would my thought process look like in trying to decide which one to go down the path? I won't say which one's better because that's not the question, but how would I decide? How would I make that decision?
So if you just need, say, Windows, iOS, and Android, the big three, and you're comfortable using the MAUI Xamarin kind of XAML, that's definitely the way to go. A lot of companies like to have that Microsoft support behind them. They're not looking to bring third parties into the equation.
Right.
So what Uno and Avalonia for the WPF flavor of XAML would give you would be Linux support and also WebAssembly, so you could deploy to the web, have people use it through the browser.
So Apollonia, what is it?
Avalonia, because
Avalonia.
WPF's code name was Avalon.
Ah, right. Okay. So Avalonia is the ability to make mobile apps from WPF. So this kind of the same way that Xamarin and MAUI and Uno all take that plumbing, take the XAML app and build a native iOS and Android and other app.
Right, so they do the same thing with the WPF flavor
Oh,
of XAML.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say I didn't know, I'm only doing Windows and Apple and Android. Let's say I don't care about Linux yet, or let's say I'm just sticking to the big three and I need to choose one or the other, MAUI or WinUI. And I don't mind using the third party Project Uno. So now a very specific question. So it's really a question of I got to learn one flavor of XAML. How do I decide which flavor of XAML to use? I guess that's really the question.
Yeah, it comes down to what your developers are comfortable with and how much do you want to branch out to using third parties. So those are the two kind of deciding factors. If you're okay using the MAUI kind of XAML, which I think most people pick up pretty quickly, it also can help you with your web developers if you have some web developers on your team, because you can use CSS with MAUI's XAML. You can't do that with any of the others.
Okay.
So you can do all your styling with the CSS.
Okay. So then I guess if you really didn't know either, you can just spend a day with each and whichever one you like better, go that route, right?
Right.
Performance-wise, it should be pretty similar. Feature-wise, are they similar in terms of the basic XAML and then the ability to use the native features of the platforms?
Right, they are pretty similar that way, and they also have the ability to avoid XAML altogether. So there's C# markup, it's called, that you can use to build your UI in your C# code instead of having XAML in the project. So now we can do that. Uno can do that.
Does that work with WinUI as well?
You can't do that natively in WinUI, but when you're building the other apps with Uno and MAUI, when they compile, it outputs a WinUI app. So it's really WinUI under the covers.
Okay. And then obviously great support in Visual Studio, good support in VS Code, particularly with the dev kit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the one support piece that you don't get with WinUI and MAUI is really an interactive editor. So you can't drag and drop your controls like you can with WPF and WinForms.
Right.
So if you have folks that like that kind of visual design, they won't get that with those.
Of course, if you've been doing XAML for as long as we have, you kind of gave up on that years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. we don't like how it builds our XAML when we drag and drop.
I would love to have it, but there's a lot of things I'd love to have that I have learned to live without. So it
Right.
doesn't really stop me.
Yeah. I would love to have just a read-only preview of what I'm building when I write my XAML.
Hmm. Um, what other? So you mentioned at the beginning that Apple's building an app in WinUI. What else is built with WinUI? And
So,
not only the apps that Microsoft builds, but what other apps that we might be familiar with?
so there's Adobe Fresco. They're the three Apple apps, and in Windows itself, the new File Explorer is WinUI.
Hmm. What about the new Outlook? Is that WinUI?
That is not. I believe that's some type of web technology. It might be React, but it's inside. I think it might be inside a web view. It's not React Native for Windows. I know.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's all web under the hood.
So what's coming in the future? I mean, .NET 9 is coming up. There's a .NET Conf right around the corner. Um, and I think we hear a lot about what's coming in the web stuff and Blazor and MAUI, but what's coming in WinUI? What should we be looking forward to?
So one of the big things coming with WinUI is performance. Really, it's getting native AOT. So ahead of time compiling, where it's going to
Mm-hmm.
strip out extra stuff when you build your apps. So you should get much faster startup performance, maybe up to 50% faster startup, smaller memory footprint.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the big advantages of UWP for many years. It had the faster startup due to that. But now we'll be getting that with WinUI and all your other .NET apps. For other platforms in .NET 9, WPF will be getting a whole new theming system. It's going to look a lot more like WinUI. You'll be able to do light and dark theme out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
And Windows Forms is also getting some theming support. They're still working on finalizing that. I saw some demos at VS Live, but they should be able to do automatic dark theme
Oh,
support. So
cool.
when you switch to dark mode, your WinForms should switch with it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you had mentioned that there were converters or migrators, so I can migrate a WPF app to WinUI.
Yes.
Okay, can I migrate a WinForm app to WinUI?
No, not. Yeah, WinForms, you can migrate from framework to .NET 8.
Okay. Can I
And
migrate a Xamarin app to WinUI or a MAUI app?
no, the upgrade tool will do Xamarin to MAUI right now.
Okay. Okay. I guess if I was thinking of making the switch, how much would I wind up wanting that, or how are they just so similar that what's the difference? Because the code you write should be the same. It's really just moving the XAML from one to another. Is there even a need for any type of tool or?
So unless you have a specific need, I would recommend just upgrading along the path that you're on already. So keep your
Okay.
WPF app in WPF and WinForms and WinForms.
Okay. All right. Cool. Now you did a talk at VS Live on this, a longer version of the subject, right?
Yes, I did a longer talk there for this, and I also did a talk about Microsoft Learn there, how they contribute.
Okay. And is the talk at VS Live? I know many of them were recorded and are up. Is this one up?
Yes, it is. I think this one is under the Windows developer account rather than the Visual Studio account like some of the others, but it's out
Okay.
there.
All right. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, and for more discussion on this, people can go do that. And I think if you'd be up for it, I'd love to have you back on the show to do some WinUI specific stuff at some point.
Yeah, that'd be great. We could get in some demos and see how you build your apps.
Yeah, maybe we'll even do a start from scratch and teach you how to use the thing.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
There you go. There's my leading question of the day. All right. Thanks so much for coming on and appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Robert. It's been great.
Hope you guys enjoyed this, and we will see you next time on Visual Studio Toolbox.